Well, welcome to the Unstoppable Freedom Podcast. I'm Jimmy Page. The Unstoppable Freedom Alliance is part of a growing movement across America that's fighting for freedom and the values and ideals that this country was founded on. Well, I'm super excited about our guest today. His name is Matt Stover. Matt was a kicker in the NFL for 20 years and played for the Giants, the Browns, the Ravens most notably, and the Colts. He has 2 Super Bowl rings, and I've seen them both. And he was an absolutely dominant field goal kicker. He's a Ring of Honor inductee for the Baltimore Ravens with monster game-winning kicks. I mean, I'm telling you, the kind that you just count on. And we loved it, especially when it came against the Steelers, for sure. Yeah. He is now the founder and president of the Players Philanthropy Fund, a 501c3 public charity that enables athletes, entertainers, and other philanthropists to create a dedicated fund that can accept tax-deductible contributions in support of any qualified charitable mission. He's married to his wife, Debbie, and they have 3 amazing kids. We've been friends now for about 30 years, which is hard to believe. Matt, welcome to the show. You didn't even want to hear that number, did you?
It just says we're old, man. We're just old dudes.
It just says we're old.
No, it's all right. But yeah, thanks for the intro, man. That was well done.
Well, hey, man, a lot of good things to say. You know, we've been friends for a long time. Super grateful for you. You are going gray. We had a little conversation off camera about how gray hair is not something you want when you're in the league. You're in the NFL, right?
Can't have it. Can't have it in the league, man. I'm telling you, you got to cover it up, and I did for years.
I love it.
At least I had it. It did make me look younger. But Tony Saragusa would always bust my chops because, Stover, you color your hair, don't you? I went, dang. Yeah.
You caught me. Yeah, it's funny you say that. My brother, once upon a time, a while back, he was going gray, and he said, "Yeah, I got to go in for a cut and color." And I'm like, "Excuse me?"
Yeah, cut and color.
And he's like, "Oh yeah." It's like you never want to let him see you sweat, and you don't want to let him see your gray hair.
I hit 54 this past year, and it was like, okay, my wife's got to love me no matter what now. So, I'm gonna go ahead and just turn gray.
Poor Debbie. It's a good thing you're a good-looking young man. Okay. I'll tell you.
You too.
Hey, so listen, we start the show the same way with everybody, and I ask just a simple question. I know this will be a softball for you. What do you love most about America, and why?
Jimmy, I think what we're living in presently is a miracle. I think that what happened back in the 16, 17, and 1800s and how we formed this United States of America, it had to be God ordained and God led. And I think that the founders were all understanding of that. And the freedom of liberty and your ability to be considered it as an individual. And the pursuit of happiness, the things that are, required to have a democracy were then established based on prior mistakes, governments had made. Also, the ability to be innovative. I think back in the 16, 17, all during the Enlightenment times, innovation was not allowed, and so therefore capitalism was always squashed. And the freedom to be able to think and to create your own podcast or your own nonprofit and to thrive within a business setting and to be able to be innovative and to be able to create and market it and capitalize on it, to me is critical and what we have today. To be able to educate my children better than I was educated. And to be able to provide for them in a way, to be a celebrity, right, in the NFL and to utilize a special talent that you have and make very good money doing it. I see all of that as just it's a privilege to be a part of the United States of America. I would love to say it's my right, but it's not. I mean, what we have, I remember the founding fathers says, hey, this is a great experiment as long as you can keep it. And, and I know that you see it as well, and I can keep rolling, but our world is definitely turning, and it is for bigger government and things that are not going to keep our freedoms if we continue to go down it.
Yeah, it's so true. I love the way you expressed your love for America. I mean, there's so many things in there. I wrote a half a page of notes, which I do as I do these podcasts because I learned so much along the way. And a couple things you said, I think what you were saying was that you have the ability to fulfill your God-given potential in this place. And you know what? That's not true in a lot of other countries. It's funny as I was looking up some stuff for your bio, which is funny because I know your bio.
Mm.
You were listed as a famous person, and I'm like, oh my
Come
gosh,
on, Stover.
I don't even. Yeah, I'm stubborn. I'm
Come
like,
on.
did they get the right guy? I mean, I don't even want to
I'm
mention
just a
that to
normal
you because
guy. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Well, you're famous. But I love the fact that you said you can fulfill your God-given potential, that you can capitalize on your creativity, on innovation, on ambition, and you don't see those qualities in so many other countries around the world, do you?
No, you don't. And in fact, the freedom of religion, my right to meet and publicly meet
Oh,
and worship my God. And I know that there's other religions out there, but to be able to do that freely, that's not allowed. It is
no.
controlled. And the ability to have the freedom to understand that if I invest in my community and it makes the community better, it's not depending on the government to do that for me. I think that you'll see the thriving communities out there in our country today. The ones that
Yes.
do that the best are the ones that thrive the most. So these are the
Yes.
things that I continue to look at. And that I recently moved to Texas because my home was always in Texas, in Dallas, and my family, my extended family. And I felt like this would be the place where my wife and I should spend the next 25 years of our life.
Isn't that interesting, especially considering you came from Maryland, which was really, I mean, an incredible run for you. I mean, in the NFL, it's very unusual, and I know some people know this, but it's very unusual for someone, number one, to be in the league more than 3.5
Yeah,
years. That's kind of the average, right?
yeah,
So you had this 20-year run, but the vast majority of that time was in
yeah.
Baltimore with one organization. Absolutely incredible run. And you know what? I didn't mention this earlier, but I'm going to get it in here just as a shameless plug for you. Your field goal percentage, career. Now, I hope this is right. 83.7%. Is that
Yeah,
right?
it's almost 84. How about
That's
that? Yeah,
that's
I made
insane.
a few field
And then
goals.
yeah, okay, that's a few. And then your extra point percentage, which is less impressive,
Yeah,
99.5%.
well, that was 20 yards away. Now it's back 33 yards away. It's real easy to miss.
Exactly. I'm counting on you getting into the Hall of Fame, buddy.
Well,
One of
thank
the
you. If it's up to God, I hope so. But
that's
that's a
right.
political piece too. That kickers,
Yeah.
really, how many kickers can you let
Yeah.
in? Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, it is tough for kickers. You should have played kicker and another position.
No,
You know,
oh no, no, no. I knew right away. Nope, I'll be back here and I'll have my clean jersey and running down on kickoffs. I'll look both ways.
exactly. Yeah, head on a swivel.
Yeah.
I understand. Well, it's funny. I love the way you talk about freedoms and liberties and religious freedom and all the rest. And I think in terms of you being a 20-year professional kicker in the NFL, you got to live the dream. You got to utilize your talents in the area that you were most passionate about. And let's talk a little bit about that NFL experience with respect to some of the topics that are floating around today. A little bit about diversity, right? There's nothing more diverse than athletics, in my opinion, right? Especially in pro football, you've got a lot of diversity in that locker room. Tell me a little bit about how that diversity really helped the team environment. What was that like in the locker room?
During my course of my career, I had a lot to learn, and it started in high school. We had black athletes, we had Asian athletes, we had white athletes. So the racial thing was never an issue for us because we always came together and worked for one purpose, and that's to win a football game. And it's a very unique environment. And how do you learn that? But by the time I got into the pros, I was mature enough to really understand that look, the NFL is a microcosm of our culture and our society as a whole. And I have a privilege here in this environment to understand the diversity piece and how to activate that for myself individually as a man. And how do I cross cultural boundaries, which there are, whether we want there to be or not. How do I look through the racial barriers that people put so much heavy weight on it? And we as a group of men, I would say 99% of the time had no issues of coexisting in that locker room. And I'm talking guys that are from the rural areas, guys that are from the urban areas, guys that were raised with a mother and a father, guys who were not, guys who were raised by their grandmother. I mean, we're talking poor to rich to to highly educated, Harvard grads, Stanford grads, and then you've got junior college guys who
Yeah.
didn't, one guy went to South Carolina State and went for 1 year and got, drafted. So the point
Yeah.
I'm making is that the privilege of being in a locker room and learning, and how I learned, and my incentive to learn was because I'm a Christian guy, and I wanted to share my faith. But
Yeah.
in order to do such, you have to earn the right to speak. And it's not something that you should just go in there and thumping a Bible and saying, "Hey guys, everybody's going to hell. You need Jesus."
That's not very effective, is it? Yeah.
They're not listening. But over a period of time, Jimmy, I had the privilege of getting to know their story. And the more that I understood their story as a man, where they came from, and then I would be vulnerable back with them. And we would create a trust between the two of us, and then they would inevitably share things with me, and we became kindred, at heart, not only as teammates because we were going for the goal to win, but also as men together. And I've walked with a lot of men. And think about this: the NFL is 78% African American. They're black guys, most of us, and I'm a minority in this locker room. And how did I exist in there, especially a small white guy, and there's a reality to it. And how what I did was I served them with love and kindness and gentleness because I was their player rep for 16 years. And this goes for everybody. That means I represented the Cleveland Browns and the Baltimore Ravens for a lot of years to help them make more money and get more benefits and take care of them and their families, and their injuries and all the things that comes with the NFL. So those are the things that I look back at and I can say, Jimmy, it was a privilege. I learned so much. Now that I had learned that, I have absolutely been able to bring that out of the NFL and understand the community and be able to cross cultural boundaries and deal and actually, preach the gospel at times and just be friends and be there at other times.
Yeah. And I've had a chance to see you do this, and I've had a chance to be in the chapel meetings with you and to see the diversity of that room, which is profound. And I never once thought to myself that I was out of place because of my race, and you because there are certain things. One of the things I love about the NFL is that it unites us, and one of the things we're trying to do from a freedom perspective is beat back all of the division, because we've got leaders in very high places in almost every aspect of American life and culture, from politics to business to big tech to education, you name it, that are in some ways incentivized to divide us, dividing us into our smaller groups, primarily by race and also gender and other things, which, most of us seek unity. Most of us love and respect people regardless of their race, regardless of their gender, but we've got leadership everywhere trying to divide us. Tell us about a little bit more about the relationships. Tell us how faith in particular might have been a unifier in that environment.
Well, I'll tell you, to add on to what you were just saying, if you want to gain power and control over a person or a people, is you separate and you divide. And if you can create that separation, you can create tribalism, you can create, this race against that race or the left or against the right, and you continue to divide. It's a power struggle, and it's all about gaining the power and the narrative of our culture, and that's what's going on today. And so, as a Christian guy inside the locker room, I understood that, right? And in no way did I ever want the gospel to come across as some controlling, force over your life. I wanted there to be freedom within it. And I think freedom comes from, knowing God in your life and having, what the Christian believe, the Spirit in you. And when I understood that and I projected it and I walked it, even when things weren't going well or I was injured or whatever it was, and I walked it, they would then look at me as a beacon of light and say, I want what you have. And so I think as a community, we have to model that, Jimmy. We have to be that person of love and light and acceptance. It doesn't mean that we tolerate sin and things that, according to my belief, that I actually, bless it and say, move on, and I'm great with it, go ahead. No, I'm going to say that if you continue to go down that path, it's going to destroy you. Or this is going to come from your life. And I've done that with a lot of guys. In fact, I'm playing golf with one of them tomorrow that I really had to hammer many a times in the locker room, but we had a good trust with one another. and a couple times I ticked him off, but because he trusted me, because of he knew where I was coming from. I wasn't coming from a position of trying to control him. It was to love on him and to be a sounding board for him and say, hey, dude, you keep going down this road, you're going to be out of the league, and I don't think you want that. And by the way, I need you on Sunday, dude. I need you, right? I mean, how you play affects
So it
me.
was selfish.
Yeah,
So it was selfish.
absolutely.
I understand. I understand. I love that picture though, right? Because you had built trust over time. And I think one of the things you said early on was that you came together around a mission greater than the individual parts, right? Because you could be the best kicker in the league and your team could still lose. You could have the best defense but not put any points on the board and the team could still be unsuccessful. So you had to have everyone on the offensive side of the ball, the defensive side, special teams, everybody had to unite around that common mission and purpose in order to be successful. The same is true with the backgrounds. You come from different backgrounds. Those things that, while wildly important to the understanding of who someone is, their values, and where they come from, and to love them well, wildly important, coming together for something greater than you. And you also mentioned this. You mentioned that you serve them. And I kind of have 3 words around that. You loved them, you cared for them, and you served them. And that creates a culture in the locker room where the boundaries kind of, all the things that divide us kind of go away because you're in it together. Is that true?
Absolutely. And in fact, if the communities would do that more and more, but as our communities, of course, the fatherless issue in our country, especially in the urban areas, and then the more taxes you pay, the more you depend on the government to do these things for you. And the government has no ability to love anyone, right?
Yeah.
But I do. I have the ability to love someone. And if there's one of me and there's one of you, and then we're in a community, then we have the capacity to love. But the government doesn't. And they're not incentivized to do so. I am incentivized to do so because of a cause and a purpose that's greater than myself, and that's the gospel of Jesus Christ. But it's not strictly, I'm not out there preaching, hey, it's to love on them as Jesus loved on others. And then through that example and through that love, right, they may understand what the truth really is. And so, Jimmy, as a whole, in my mind, it was never perfect, and it's so funny. There was a couple times I had a bad day, and I may have thrown a cuss word out, and they looked at me like, "Whoa, what the heck?" And I say, "Yeah, I know I'm a fallen guy, just like you guys." So in no way is there perfection, but there is a sense of understanding. Look, I'm called to a higher cause and a higher purpose, and how I manage that, I will be rewarded or judged by it. So that's what the Bible says. So I'm gonna do my best to live by it.
I love that, and I think that's why the beauty of sports. And I spent a lot of time of my adult life in sports ministry, playing sports my entire life. Still a competitor, still compete in Spartan races, and I do that for a lot of different reasons. But partly because I love the competitive spirit. If you ever went to a Spartan race, and we won't go down this trail too far, but if you ever went to a Spartan race and competed, you would see probably an absolutely unbelievable amount of diversity. I mean, people that you would not necessarily consider, hey, these are people that are probably going to be my neighbors or my friends. But I'm telling you, the camaraderie, the connection, the relationship, the joy that you have, and all of a sudden you realize that, hey, you know what? People that may look different than me, or people that may have tattoos from head to toe, they may not be that different from me. And I love that because all of us are made in God's image.
That's it.
And the less we make assumptions based on external appearances, the better. My mom always used to say, don't judge a book by its cover. Instead, get to know the character of the person. And once you do, you'll have a greater appreciation for them. Was that the secret sauce of the locker room, getting to know the real person around you?
It takes effort and intentionality to do it, Jimmy. It's just not going to happen. And a lot of these guys really never had a relationship with a white guy. I mean, literally, and vice versa. And so the intentionality behind it, I never had that issue. I went to a high school, we had plenty of diversity. And so what you have to understand is that me as a person, I don't, if you allow race to be an issue, it is, right? It is. But if it's not an issue, then it's about the person. as a human being. And, people say, well, it's got to be a colorless society. How you look at it? Well, yes, there is some identity to it. There's some, I'm Greek, there's some identity with the Greek community, and what does that look like? And so there are cultural things that I have because of that, how I was raised, and vice versa in every other, ethnic
Yes.
community, which is fine. I think it's beautiful, right?
Yes.
I don't see it as a negative. I don't see it as, I mean, and I've talked to lots of Muslims and people from different faiths even. And what I do is I try to find the common ground, and I try to
Yeah.
find where we can agree on. And because there's always going to be disagreement in every room you go in, and that's
Of
what makes
course.
sports so good, is that we can all agree on that. If we all come together and we work together, we can
Yeah.
win this game. And if we win this game, we can win the Super Bowl, and that type of stuff. So
Yes.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is awesome. And I think that intentionality really matters. One of the things that you touched on earlier is that, and you didn't say it quite this way, but this is what you said. Rights come from God, not government.
Yep.
You said that government isn't going to love you, and boy, is that for sure. In fact, they're going to use you for sure. They're going to, spitefully use you and control you if they can with fear and division. They divide and conquer. It's an age-old strategy. And that's why whenever I see any leader who is profiting in some way or benefiting from dividing us, I automatically, out of hand, reject their ideology, because that is unprofitable, is not good for us. But rights come from God, not government. America actually is the first and only nation to recognize that we are created by our Creator with we're all equal, and that we're created with certain unalienable rights that government can't take away, that come from God. And the thing with our documents, our founding documents, is the role of government is actually to secure your individual
That's
rights
right.
and freedoms.
Individual
And
rights and freedom,
yeah,
not as a group.
exactly.
You're individual. Right.
Exactly.
Mm.
And I love that because, but we're losing some of that, right? And I know that it concerns you, it concerns me. We're going to touch on that in a minute. One of the other guys that was super instrumental, just to close up this NFL chapter, one of the other guys that was super influential in the locker room was a guy named Johnny Shelton.
Hmm.
Johnny Shelton, for many, many years, was the chaplain for the Ravens. He
Still
still
is.
is,
Hmm.
and he's intricately involved in the lives of players, coaches, their families, making an incredible difference. He was incredibly generous with the chapel time by inviting me in a couple times every year, and I always loved that. I never told anybody that. It was always just something that I was thankful for. I didn't want to use it as something to beat my chest about, but instead I went in to serve them. What I loved about him is he was very intentional. He would tell me he was intentional to make sure that the guys on the team heard from different voices, from people that looked different from them, that maybe had different experiences from them. And I viewed that as an absolute honor to come in and serve people that may have come from different backgrounds from me. I feel like that's what you've been talking about this whole time, is the ability to walk into these circles and make a difference, and that it's an honor to do so.
It is, and Johnny's a great example of that. He was with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes for years, and took over after Rod Harrison, whom I was a big piece of bringing Rod into the locker room and leading into that environment. And having a black pastor, chaplain in there is important. I think but
Yes.
it's not totally necessary, because I've had white males, and I've seen Asians and other males and leading that
Yeah.
way, but if the players feel as though you have their best interest as a
Mm.
person, as a human being, and then you earn the right to speak because of his intentionality of him bringing in, and they see it over time, they will open up to you as a person. And this goes community wide. It's
Yeah.
not just in the locker room. This is the way it is. And
Yeah.
I think the most important thing that Johnny does a great job of is he shows up. He is there in their midst, and he's paid to do so, right? I get it. But if you show up and you show people that you care, it's not
Yeah.
just about your words. It's not just about your money. It's about you showing up, and it's about you showing the love and the action behind that love. Yeah.
Yes, so true. And the Ravens organization, and you know this better than anybody because you've been involved in it intricately. So the Ravens organization was an organization that valued people of faith,
Mhm.
that valued the idea that faith could be a unifier in the locker room, and we saw it. I remember seeing guys like Craig Versteeg and
Mhm. Yeah.
a whole bunch of the coaches, John Harbaugh, so many
Yeah.
people in the locker room,
Mhm.
so many people in player development. I think of OJ
Mm.
Bergantz and so many
Harry
others.
Swain. Yeah. Right.
Harry Swain. I mean, these guys were amazing because they cared about people and they brought the essence of their faith to every interaction, that loving, caring, serving attitude. And I think that is something that can unite us. And it's something that we can learn from the competitive environment of sports, the locker room, and bring to the rest of our culture. Don't you think?
Absolutely. In fact, the model that I have in my life is number one, I serve God. Number two, I serve my family. I make sure that community that I'm responsible for, my family, I'm going to serve that to the utmost, right? From there, it branches out into a smaller community, which may be my neighborhood, maybe my work environment, right? And then it goes to from there into the city or the town that you live in, and then from there, if you have and are blessed with a national platform, which I have been at times, then you do that as well, right?
Yeah.
And I think that if you take that and you can make a huge difference just in your family, because then if you can influence the next generation to do it better than you, and then your community, but when the disintegration of the family happens, that number one community that every human being has in their life is completely disrupted, right?
Yes.
And the community is broken, and then they don't know how to serve the community from the outside. And so they need to have people that come into their lives and serve them. And it cannot come from the government. It's got to come from inside the community. And I think the church should be the one who leads the way. I do think the
That's
church
great.
should be the number one institution that does it. And I think that the church, we're failing quite miserably these days.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, unfortunately, I think you're right. And I think, sport has become, sport used to be an escape for a lot of people, right? It used to
Still
be
is.
something pure.
Yeah.
I mean, oh, yeah. Oh, big time, right? We want to watch games because it's a reflection of life in many ways, the
Hmm.
competitive spirit, the work ethic, the
Hmm.
the ups and then downs, the momentum swings, that you're overcoming challenges, that there are obstacles in your way to creating success. I mean, there's so many things that you can just love about sport. And I know sport has become kind of a bullseye of sorts now for a lot of controversies, right? And part of this is touchy, right? Most people don't want to touch on these topics, but one of the things that I think has been front and center in the news has been this idea of unfair competition, right? And I don't think it matters as much why there's unfair competition so much as the fact that there is unfair competition. And one of the things we've seen most recently is where we've had a biological male athlete competing in the arena of swimming and having wild success there, and a whole lot of people feeling like that's created an unfair advantage for him, he's transitioned to the female. The question is this the way to create equity? Is this the way to create equality in the world of sports where you have biological men competing against biological women? Is that a challenging point for us today as we try and defend our daughters? I mean, I know you have a daughter. I have a daughter in sports.
Yeah.
How does this issue strike you?
It's my personal experience with it. It comes down to actually an experience I had in the NFL where I was part of as a union rep. I was a part of what the penalty should be for anybody that takes performance enhancing drugs.
Mm.
And I was one of the first ones to stand up and say, one strike, you're out.
Yeah.
And there's no tolerance and there's a list. And I don't care how it got into your body. I don't care. It's in your body. You're guilty, right? So
Yep.
somebody could have slipped you. I don't care. So, and the reason was because now I have to compete against that individual who has a very clear advantage
Yeah.
above me.
Especially in football.
football and as a brute sport, and just the ability to recover.
Yes.
Right. The older you get, here I played till I was 42. I was the oldest guy to ever play in a Super Bowl until Tom Brady beat me a couple years ago. Turd. But
Oh man.
mind you, he was a quarterback. I was a kicker. There's a big difference. But
Yeah.
but if you think about that alone, if I feel that way about testosterone, right, any performance enhancing drug that somebody could take as a male and having a clear competitive advantage over me, and I had no tolerance for it, then how can I say that any different than the female piece, where
Yeah.
I'm a male clearly with more testosterone in me? I have a clear competitive advantage over a female because they don't have as much. Let's just look at the
No.
biology,
Yeah,
right?
it's just the biology.
And that's why there's some males out there that don't have a lot of testosterone. They don't have a lot of strength, and therefore they'll never play in the NFL.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same way I feel about. I really don't think a female, based on their biology, would ever be able to compete at a high enough level to play in the NFL. It hadn't happened today, and I don't think it's going to happen. And not because I don't think females shouldn't have. My daughter was an All-American lacrosse player. I used to throw her the rolls across the table to make sure she could catch, right? And we were working it, right? And as a father, so Jimmy, it's something that it comes down to, the biology, and every cell in a woman is completely different than every cell of a man. And so you get into the gender identity piece and
Yeah.
that stuff. What I'm talking about, what we're talking about, is the athletic piece. And
Yes.
I do think it clearly creates an unfair competitive advantage.
Yeah, and you've touched on it, like just the basic biology, and we've got enough evidence of the biology that testosterone creates a significant advantage in just about every direction. The Duke Center for Sports Law and Policy a while back had some research where there is an average of 10 to 12% performance gap between elite male athletes and elite female athletes, regardless of sport, and every indicator that affects athletic performance, including bone density, muscle mass, lung capacity, center of gravity, they all favor biological men. So we have science at stake here, and incredibly, I think that's the issue.
Yeah.
Is this creating an unfair advantage? And frankly, it's creating a lose-lose proposition, right? The whole situation with the NCAA is they've created a situation where they have successfully failed everyone. The competitor that they allow to compete against women, the biological male who competes against women, is losing because of the criticism that they're getting. The female athletes that have worked so hard to get to the highest level of swimming their performance has been diminished. They're losing opportunities to compete at the highest level. Everyone's losing. And I think that's what we're after here is, creating a culture where everyone can thrive and fulfill their God-given potential. And I think this unfair competition is one of those things that, I was thinking about my daughter playing lacrosse, just like yours. I probably would not have allowed her to compete on an athletic field against a biological male in lacrosse.
No way. No way. Can you imagine no way.
No.
Right.
No. Because it wouldn't be safe. It wouldn't be safe. And I think we're all agreeing that, we don't want to create an environment that unnecessarily disadvantages someone else by creating an opportunity.
Well, the Dallas 14-year-old under U15 team that beat the women's USA soccer team. Really? So it's not because women aren't capable. I'm not saying that, right? It's all about the advantage of competition. And is there one? And that's why, as a player rep, we had no tolerance. And I didn't care what was on that list. I didn't care.
Yeah.
If protein was on that list, I don't know how they would monitor that, but then you can't take it. But everything that they had on the those substances was very well known throughout the. And then let me tell you, the NFL does a very good job of testing the athletes to make sure that doesn't happen. And I loved it. I always complied. Let's go. And so in my mind, if just that piece was taken and allowed the NCAA to say no more because competitive advantage, they'd be their way out.
Yes, I agree. And then you don't have to deal with any of the other controversial issues surrounding it because, frankly, we love and honor and respect all people. And, we may disagree with some decisions that others make, just like they may disagree with decisions that we make.
Right.
That's not what this is. This is
Nope.
about unfair competition.
Right.
I love that. And, it's funny. I remember back in the day with the protein that they would have certified
Yeah.
drug-free protein
NSF,
powders.
National Safety Federation, would have a batch test on it because
Yes.
athletes, they were buying stuff from these stores and they were spiking it with things that would give you more, whether it was ephedrine or whatever it was,
Yeah.
and it was they were testing positive and they proved it, but the
Yes.
NFL would still say sorry.
Yeah.
You can't,
Yeah.
so they gave us a safer environment to be able to buy the products that were legal.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're responsible for everything that goes
Everything
into
in,
your body,
right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's shift gears just a little bit. Let's look at the broader context outside of the NFL locker room and your competitive experience, which has been profound. When you look at the broader context of America today and even the world, obviously there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of chaos.
Mhm.
When you look at that, what are the top one or two things that you're most concerned about when you look at what's happening around freedom in America?
That we continue to turn our back on God. Any
Hmm.
culture that's ever done that always falls. Rome, England,
Wow.
Germany, they always fall. Don't turn your back on him. I think that a godless society ends up being secular and it becomes empowering the human spirit with regard to it's us that control the world. And
Yeah.
no, there's no love in that. It's all very,
Yeah.
very much nepotism, and that frightens me. So for
Yeah.
my children, you know, trying my best to put them in communities and side of environments that have a God-fearing understanding, and that they are in those communities so that the people that are around them will support them and help them in their times.
So good.
And have my daughter marrying a Christian man, Tim Webster. I love the guy, and his ability to strengthen my daughter and vice versa in their faith is critical. So I think that's the number one piece, and of course, as we see that our country is moving further away from God. And more reliance on the government, then that gives my fear. Then, if there is any, mind you, I know that God wins at the end of the day, but it's the protection of my family and their future and my grandchildren. So I do what I can to set up some fences to not, go live in a cave by any means,
Yeah.
but to definitely understand it and then be prepared for anything that could come. And God's got us, but I'm doing my best to help protect my family.
Yeah, it's so good. One of the things that you mentioned, I think the number one thing you mentioned was just kind of abandoning God, or, not recognize that God is sovereign and good. And I started to think, it's so true, right? That now truth is up for debate. Now just basic things that we accepted as truth and fact. Now there is no objective truth. So anything goes. And I think that's what we're experiencing as well, is that, and that, people of faith is a stabilizer, right? It helps us to know how to act, how to treat others, how to be in relationship with them so that we can be in it for their benefit, for their good. And I think when you don't have that, I think things become much more selfish. I think you become much more confused about things. I think your foundation gets shaken. And I'm concerned about that as well. And right now, as we speak, freedom of religion and the freedom of speech are under greater attack now than at any time in our history. There are cases before the Supreme Court that are going to have broad effect. Coach Kennedy, who was the coach up in Washington State, who prayed at the 50-yard line after every game. He said he was going to honor God. He had a private moment of prayer there. His case will be heard before the Supreme Court in the next month or so. So we're seeing the implications of a society that has turned away from God in large numbers, and it is going to affect the way we are able to privately and publicly express our faith. It's a concern.
Well, our founding fathers, separation of church and state. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the way our culture sees it today, where religion
Mm.
can't come into the government. It's where the government can't come into religion. And it's
Yeah.
just like, it's backwards, people, right?
Yes.
It's the
Yes.
fact that, all over the Washington, D.C., there's scripture verses everywhere, right? Including on
Yeah.
top of the Washington Monument. I mean, you go through all
Yes.
the Supreme Courts and there it is, right? So it
Yes.
shows you that if there's a way of gaining, remember, power and control, you separate and you divide,
Mm.
and you capture the narrative. And whether it's a gay bill down in Florida or it's really about parental rights,
Yes.
it's dealing with the creating that narrative that says, oh, it's a gay bill, it's an anti-gay bill. No, it's not. Right?
Not whatsoever.
It's between the kindergartens and third grade. Leave that to the parents. My gosh, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I'm one of those conservative guys that I wish they would leave it all out of high school.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and funny enough, you mentioned something important, right? You mentioned that God is being pushed out and government in many ways is trying to take the place of God.
absolutely.
And that's why you get these bills, because more government control, less reliance on God, more government control.
Well, let me tell you, the state of Texas just passed a constitutional amendment that the
Mm.
government could never prevent us from the right to assemble. Now,
Mm.
that means that if COVID hit again and they lock down our communities, they cannot stop the church from assembling. Right?
That's amazing.
They fought for, our founding fathers fought for the freedom of speech and the right to assemble so that they can discuss that as a community. Just think what they did
Yes.
during COVID and what that did to the communities.
Yes.
It separated us, it divided us, it isolated us. And that's how you
Yes.
gain control. And it just scares the death out of me for my children. So being I believe in a community here that has less tolerance for that type of power and control is going to help protect my family. So,
Yes.
who knows? But I do know this. There is truth out there. There are absolutes. And there is sin in this world. And there are consequences. And if you
Yes.
choose to do sinful behaviors, there are consequences. And vice versa. If you're doing good in the world, there are consequences.
Yes. It's interesting you talked about the effects of COVID, right? We had and we're not going to get into the science of this, although I think the science is rather settled.
Yeah.
We can't, I'm not allowed to talk about that, interestingly enough, talk about free speech. The interesting thing about that time, and the reason we're fighting as an organization around the country so fiercely, is that we don't want what happened during COVID. We don't want the mitigation strategies, the heavy-handed government mandates, passports, control to be able to ever happen again. Because, and the silencing of experts, doctors, physicians who had practiced, who were at the top of their field, completely silenced. Every narrative opposing the approved narrative, national narrative, was silenced. We don't ever want that to happen again. We don't ever want these mandates to be so oppressive that you can destroy lives and livelihoods, that you can negatively impact kids the way we did, that you can negatively impact families, that people's lives can literally be destroyed. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of businesses went out of business because of these lockdowns. We don't ever want that to happen again. It's interesting that you talked about the Bill of Rights. It's funny. They're not. It's more the Bill of Restraint, the Bill of Protections. They're really actually statements that restrict the government's involvement and leaves most of everything else up to us as individuals. That's what we're after, and that's the society we want to hand down to the next generation, isn't it?
Absolutely. In fact, if you look at our communities that got hurt the most, they're typically
Ah,
the weakest
yes,
piece, and that's the poor, and then it comes down to the elderly, and then our children,
yes,
right? And it to me, that's the tragedy behind it. And
yes,
so much of the narrative has been, no, we're here for you. We're here to help you. We're gonna have zero COVID. It's gonna,
yes,
and none of it worked. And I hope
yes,
that what my prayer is that America's not stupid. That's my
yep,
hope. And that they
yep,
see it and that they say, never again, right, Jimmy?
yes,
Never again,
yes,
because that didn't work. Thank goodness we saw it now, and we're never going to let that happen. And that's my prayer. And too many
Yep.
people made mistakes, and I think with retrospects are looking back, and even the ones who firmly in all their passion, all their heart,
Yep.
believed in what they were doing was right, now can see, oh my goodness, how
Yeah.
wrong were we. I hope that
Yeah.
that comes, even with the pride out there. I hope that they can gain the vulnerability and say, you know what, that was wrong, and it should never happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good. And one of the things I love about having a guest like you on the program is that you're so outspoken. What this does for people in our culture, in our communities, is it gives them permission to weigh in. Hearing from you, hearing your perspective on freedom and liberties and the gift that America is, hearing you weigh in on the effects of COVID gives other people the courage. It empowers them to enter the conversation because right now, and you know this, most people are afraid to talk about just about anything
Hmm.
because they're afraid of being judged, they're afraid of being silenced or canceled, they're afraid of losing their jobs. So hearing from you is just an important piece of this story.
Yeah, it's how you do it too. We can
Yep.
have differing opinions. We can understand that there's never you're never going to get 10 people in the same room and have identical. It's just not
Very true.
possible, right? Uh,
Very true.
but where do you find commonality? Where do you find ways of moving forward?
Mhm.
And I think as the United States of America, we have to do that. And the more that government sticks their nose in it, the worse it's going to be.
Yeah.
So, because like I said earlier, they don't have the capacity to love. They don't have the capacity to really serve. Protect us, regulate some of the business and stuff around here. Make sure that uh, our food source and sure, but as a whole, let's let the communities take care of that. And I pray that our communities
I
will become
agree.
stronger because of the COVID issue
I
going
agree.
on.
You remember this quote from President Reagan, the eight most dangerous words ever spoken. I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
I remember that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
It's like absolutely, hey, you just stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane,
Stay in your
dude. All
lane.
right.
Hey, so let's shift because I know that so much of what you're doing today is really born out of your values. Tell us
Mhm.
about the Players Philanthropy Fund.
Yeah.
Why did you set it up? What's its mission? Tell us about that, and how is it making a difference?
Well, Jimmy, thanks for the opportunity to share something my partner and I, Seth McDonald, started back in 2010, right when I stepped out of the league. My last year was 2009. It was set up to facilitate charitable giving for professional athletes, celebrities, and ended up being a huge platform for just any individual who wanted to have their own private foundation, but understood that in order to run my own private foundation, I have to know a lot about compliance, accounting, all the rules, and people don't, and they don't realize that there's a big legalese behind nonprofit, and you can really get yourself in trouble pretty quick. And the IRS doesn't have much sympathy to it because because you tell them you didn't know. So we try to
Yeah.
be that resource that allows people to know that if they're going to allow us to be their fiscal back office, we are called fiscal sponsorship.
Hmm.
My public foundation allows other individuals, corporations, celebrities. I mean, you can look at the Players Philanthropy Fund, you can see my roster and go, oh, okay. And I have 390 different accounts inside of my one single foundation, and that allows them to operate as if they have their own. That's white labeled. They're allowed to go out and raise funds. We come around them and we make sure that all the finances, the fiscal piece, FISCAL, is all compliant and
Hmm.
distributed and raised properly. And
That's amazing.
we do it on a low percentage rate because it was our job to do it efficiently and effectively, and so that we could scale. And that's why we have 390 and growing
That's
at about
amazing.
16 a month. Um,
Wow.
so
Is that right?
yeah,
That's
and we could
amazing.
do more than that, but we have to pump brakes, right? And so the thing behind it is that the amount of money that we're able to facilitate back into we were a fledgling for 8 years. We were trying to figure out our model and how it works, and I didn't even know what fiscal sponsorship meant. And we were a donor advised fund, and being in business, right? You figure things out as you go. And by year 9, we were understanding that, okay, now we get it, and we have a process that forces compliance. And so, if you're an
Mhm.
agent, you're a financial advisor, you're somebody that comes around these professional athletes, they understand the value of that because they don't want their
Yes.
athlete or celebrity to get in trouble. If you're an individual who wants to run their own foundation, but that they don't want to get into the weeds of
Mm.
state registrations, doing business as, DBAs, all the filings for the tax 990s or the audit or any of those things, we do all that, right?
Wow.
The charitable sales tax, right, for nonprofits, all those things, we do it. So as a whole, Jimmy, we
Mm.
put over $30 million through it this past year, and it probably will
Gosh.
be near double next year, and then double again based on how things continue to progress. And the reason
That's
for that
amazing.
is that our reputation is excellent. And one of the things I do have to say is that
Mm.
we do our best to stay in our lane, and we're not trying.
Yeah.
We don't take on accounts that have polarizing issues. We want
Hmm.
to keep it very neutral. We want to, hey, everybody can agree that cancer is a bad thing. And
Yes.
we're going to do what we can to fund that fight. We can all agree that child abuse is a very bad thing,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Or hunger. So it's if the room can agree on that it's a good cause, all of us, meaning 10 people in a room that can't ever come together with if all 10 of us can agree, then what we'll say is absolutely. So and that's why we don't get into the vices of issues. My one account doesn't get it go against another account. It just strictly
Right.
let's build a community that can love and serve, and that's what it's about.
Yeah. What I love about it is you're basically taking on some areas of expertise that most people who are starting a charitable foundation are not going to have. You're doing a lot of the stuff behind the scenes that gets them to do what they're called to do, what they're made to do, and propels them into it much faster than they would be on their own.
I'm doing it right now. There's somebody that wants to do exactly what we're doing, right,
Mm.
in their own foundation in California with all the celebrities there. And I'm going to be able to say, absolutely, we can just plug and play. And we can tell you all
Right.
about the insurance, the banking, the books, and all, we'll do it. So all that stuff has really been a fun process, and to know that we're doing it at such a discounted rate that more dollars are going to the community than they would if they were using even their own. We're doing it so much more
It's
efficiently
amazing.
than if they had their own private foundation.
It's fantastic. And as a nonprofit, I totally understand what you're talking about, and we're grateful you're doing what you're doing. You
Yeah.
know, what's your favorite part of what you're doing right now?
It's facilitating it. It's getting the individual to understand that there is an engine behind what their passion, what you said to do, and to
Mm.
keep that engine clean and operating efficiently and effectively is really what it's about. When you find your little niche in the market and you're empowering people to go out and do good work, right?
Yeah,
And to change the community that I was talking about, right?
yeah,
And people said, so what? So if I'm going to sit here and tell you that it really comes down to the community, it really comes down not to the government, it really, then do
right.
something about it, right?
Yes,
That's my
yes.
thing. I mean, don't sit there and tell me what should be done. Do something, and that's what
Do
I'm doing.
something. Yes.
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love that. It's like be brave, do something.
yeah, yeah.
Make it happen. Act on it. It's like faith without works is dead. You got to take that faith, that certainty of the future, and say, man, I'm going to do something about the present right now.
Yeah, and the
It's
passion
awesome.
behind the action for me was because I understood during the course of my career that I had my own private foundation. I had a good team around me that managed it, but I understood that my platform, I had a privilege to be able to raise money, give away money, and be a part of the
Mm.
community. There
Yeah.
were times I was kicking field goals, and people were donating to foundations because of it, right?
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
when I understood that, I also as a kicker, you kind of have your offense's back because when they don't
Yeah.
score, you have to go in there and clean up the mess and get at least 3 points, right? So I always,
Hey, real quick on that.
yeah,
Real quick on cleaning up the mess.
I
There
got,
were games, there were seasons where you had the most offensive points for us. I
well,
mean, it's ridiculous.
yeah, well, and in fact, where it was incredible, yeah, there was a huge divide.
Our Super Bowl
The
season.
defense almost had as many points as our offense. What are you kidding me?
It's so true. I digress. But our Super Bowl season, I think
Yeah,
that was true, that
that was
you
true.
might have been the leading scorer.
Well, by
Yep.
far. Yeah.
So you had the back of your offense for sure.
Absolutely. So, creating that I just always felt like the sniper on the roof that was taking out the bad guy for the guys that are down there in the trenches. That's was kind of my MO. Being the player rep, always wanted to protect the player, and come around them and serve them was always what I loved to do. And so I just brought that out of the NFL and learned how to do it. And my team is spectacular. I do such little work with regard to the nuts and bolts because you do not want me doing your books.
No,
You do not, all right, or your tax
I think you're
return.
right.
No. So
I think you're right on that.
yeah, no, exactly. And so I've had a blast doing it, and it is so much fun. And if we never get recognized for anything, that is not why I'm doing it. It's strictly to give back and to love this community that I so much say that this is what it comes down to. It doesn't come down to the government. It comes down to us as the communities and coming around and supporting that. And sometimes it takes money to do it, as we know.
Yeah. Well, I think you've said it well, and I think you've expressed how your faith has influenced everything that you've done in your life, and it's kind of informed your desire to give back. Is there a last encouragement that you would give our listeners for something they could do to make a difference, to take a stand for freedom and to make a difference in their communities?
I think too many people think that you have to create the Players Philanthropy Fund and do $30 million to have an effect on. No, you don't. Let's start first of all with yourself. Love yourself, and then love your neighbor. And who's your neighbor? It's whomever comes into your path. We're all in this world together. I mean, we're all human beings. And I think too often we think that we have to do something big and huge. No, it really comes down to the old lady who lives next door and she's by herself, going by and supporting her and making sure that she's got what's necessary, and just to have a conversation with her. Those acts of kindness. I had a friend of mine that I now have in Texas. This is great. He's from California. And he's in a Starbucks line in his car at the drive-through, and the car in front of him drives off, and then he pulls up and he's handing him his credit card, and the attendant says, "No, the guy in front of you paid for your coffee." He went, "What? What? Why would he do that?"
Yeah.
And she says, "People do it all the time. You should do it for somebody." And he went, "That's incredible. This is great. That was a $5.
He'd never thought of it.
Oh my gosh." They were just blown away by that act of kindness. So, leaning and doing that for one person can multiply. And because showing that type of generosity, that type of love, that type of kindness to somebody, people aren't used to it. And I've paid for people's, somebody's in the grocery line, and I hand them my credit card, and because I just could tell,
When are you going to be at the store?
Yeah, I know. It's like what? What did you just do? I said, because I stuck my card in the card thing, and I said, "I got you. Yeah. You look like you need some encouragement." Those type of things, right? And I know I have the privilege of being able to do that, some resources I have. But there's so many other little things you can do, Jimmy. What I love what you're doing is you're bringing light. You're having the conversations, and so that when people hear my story and maybe my thinking, it may trigger that little bit of a thought, and say, "You know what? He's right. I may not be able to do all that, but there is something I can do with that one person, maybe the attendant at Starbucks, maybe whoever it is, to encourage." And I think that we should, if we do that, this world will be a better place.
So good. And that's a great note to close on. Matt, hey, so grateful for you, for your friendship, for your family. Thanks for being so outspoken about your faith and about ways to make our culture better, ways to make America better, and to make a difference. I really appreciate you, my friend.
Hey, you too, Jimmy. Appreciate you. And Evilise, God bless you and your family.
God bless, man.